I'm Al Hoover.
Hi, Al.
Pleasure.
I'm Kelly Thomas in Ward 1 on Breas.
Ah, okay.
Council, Mayor, my name is Casey Compcho from Ward 4.
Great. Okay. Well, why don't we have a set of prepared questions, but why don't we begin if you would just give us a couple of minutes on why you want to be on the Planning Commission, any experience you would like to highlight. Just make it fairly short, though, and then we'll run through some questions.
Go ahead. Yeah, this is Kelly Thomas again for the record, and just moved here about 6 months ago, and itching to get involved in the community. Went to a couple NEN boards, was elected to serve on that board, and then just saw that this opening was here, and I started off as I got a degree in architecture, started off as a planner, went into politics, got out of that very quickly, and then moved on to home building and development. And then since then, been working on energy efficiency issues, and currently work for the state of Nevada, excuse me, that's where I came from, the state of Oregon, and still
Same
getting used
thing.
to that, state of Oregon, and the building code division, and I'm in charge of working on the net zero energy policy for mostly the residential, but a little bit of the commercial.
Great. Thank you very much.
Al Hoover. We located my wife and I here last April. Previously, we were in Napa, California, and experience-wise, faculty, Georgia Tech, principal investigator with the National Science Foundation, MBA degree in finance. And in Napa, I was the co-chair for the Civil Service Commission.
Ah, great. Thank you. Did you know a guy named Joe Trachtenberg at Georgia Tech? Remember that name at all?
That name is familiar, actually.
Yeah, he was a classmate of mine here before he went back there.
It's a good school.
It is. That's what he told me. Yes.
Casey Compcho. I too am new to Salem. I've been here for about 2 years now, and so I feel at ease that we're all relatively new Salemites up here. My experience is largely predicated on my ability to consult governments in how to consult criteria to provide recommendations and how to improve regulatory operations and compliance components of those governments. I started my career out in Washington, D.C. for the Government Accountability Office, providing a number of recommendations to federal agencies there, where I took my skill set to Texas, worked there for a number of years before I decided I want to go somewhere not so hot, and we moved up this way a few years ago.
Well, great. Well, welcome all of you to town. Thank you very much for applying to be on our Planning Commission. Really appreciate it. Councilor Kaiser, would you like to kick this off? Or would you rather?
One at a time. So
Sorry.
ask you a question. I'm just going to ask a question from the list of questions.
That's fine.
And just had it here. Imagine that you are on the Planning Commission. You receive a report for a hearing, and after reading it, you are in an agreement with the applicant, and it fits your philosophy on development. During the public hearing, you receive information from the opposing side that soundly makes the case for denying the application. How would you resolve the conflict between the two positions? And I think we could just start maybe 1, 2, 3, and maybe the next question we could reverse it.
That's right.
Okay, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I'll just start with the example from the last Planning Commission meeting, the development, the 180 units that's going in there by the what's called the old Fairview site.
Yeah, Old Fairview.
Yeah, and so I mean, it looked it looked very good on the surface. I listened. There was a large community that came out, and they said the school. I mean, it's a great training exercise for the kids on civic engagement and everything. And they came out, and a lot of people spoke against it, and so. I could see and then to understand, back up a little bit, to understand that this developer has been involved in the community and gives back and has like a philanthropy arm, and so you're looking like they have very good intentions. You've got some opposition here with the neighborhood. My thought actually was, well, wow, this could have been solved if they had just had an open house or a meeting of sort before this. I mean, it could have, there are some very simple things, just really from site planning that could have been done. And so I was really pleased to see that open houses and neighborhood notifications are on what's being changed tomorrow night's planning commission. So that was my first thought, is try to resolve some of these in advance. I mean, they're kind of hard to do on the fly when you're up here, but my philosophy is really about balance. I've been really was bit by the sustainability bug back in School of Architecture days, and try to find a balance between the social, economic, and environmental interests on every application. And then I would try to find some way where that was still if that was still a legitimate application that met with the general tenets of the comp plan, which is changing. I'm excited to see that too. Try to find that win-win situation.
Thank you.
I haven't been involved with city planning. I'm sure if you saw my resume, you know that, but I've run a multi-million-dollar company that was a directed federal government contractor. And we many times had contractual, if you will, discrepancies between what the deliverables were, what the constituency had, who the stakeholders were. And it is certainly always the case that you need the open communication. You need to set people's expectations in advance about what are going to be the requirements, whether it's in the zoning, whether it's in deliverables on the contract, whether it's in setbacks. Understand what the rules are and communicate those in an open fashion. Listen a lot, because you're going to find out ahead of time what the problems are if you just engage early on. And in fact, in the example that my peer brought up here, it seemed like people were upset because there was, quote, not enough notice. There seemed to be, issues about proper identification of what the requirements were. And early planning, early communication, trying to do it in a collaborative fashion, I think is going to be key to resolving any of these, yet work within the comprehensive plan.
So what I would do in a situation where I had an idea of what my response was going to be, and then I heard new evidence to support the other side and thought maybe my initial thinking was incorrect or wrong. As they've said, I think a number of preemptive things could help resolve that. But barring that, my experience has shown me that the first thing that I would do is consult the expert staff that we have available at the city and really glean their knowledge and see if maybe there was something from their expert point of view that I was just missing in my original interpretation. Second, I would see how it aligns with the unified plan and how the new information aligns with that. And then third, I would take the time to weigh the consequences that may not have been immediately clear to me outside of the initial action, some maybe secondary or tertiary or tertiary consequences as well.
All right. Councilor.
Thank you. I actually printed them out in the old style, so I'll go to the first question here. And I'll ask Al if you could start, and we'll just go from 2 to 3 to 1. The Salem Planning Commission acts as an advisory commission to the City Council with a broad scope of concern in promoting growth and orderly development of the City of Salem. Based on this statement, explain what you see the role of the Planning Commission, and I'm particularly interested in growth versus, not growth and orderly development, how those two can coexist.
Okay. The Planning Commission, from the standpoint of sort of looking at orderly growth, the commission, advises on a range of issues that people are going to look for, whether it's traffic congestion and sidewalks, zoning regulations, and by the way, I'm very pleased to see in the recent meetings that looking at the unified code for zoning is being addressed so that there's not this patchwork of sort of different zoning areas, particularly in the 12th to 29th Street on State. But, you know, the Planning Commission outlines and reviews, you know, the results of studies, the projects, and they have to look at that balance between economic development and, you know, we need a strong economy, we need, you know, strong city, strong tax base, and the rights of our citizens to have the reasonable enjoyment of the residence and city that they are paying for. And I think that you have to weigh that balance always. I also believe that that's why when I was in Napa, there was the 2020 plan, and here you have the comprehensive plan that looks out for the long-range impact of support systems, infrastructure, sewer, water, the ability, you know, to handle water runoff, all these things. So you're always having to balance that between economic development on one side and people's property rights on the other. I'm actually a strong advocate of property rights, but it can't impinge on either the comprehensive plan or other people's enjoyment of the city and their property. Hope that answers your question.
So with respect to the role of the Planning Commission, I think that there's, when I look at it from kind of a twofold approach, and that's one, to help the city staff engage in short-term or short-range and long-range planning, and the second being to look holistically at the use codes and provide the thoughtful insight in a way that really reflects what the citizens want and need, in a way that also aligns with the direction of the code and of the council's leadership. With that said, as it relates to growth and land rights of owners, I think of a few good examples of recent, one being the Costco Kubler Gateway decision-making process that's I think still underway as a result of appeal. And I think what you saw there was a fine balance from the city to engage the community and really listen in a meaningful way. And I think that's really important to do because, you know, coming from the ultra congested urban area of DC and moving to a slightly less, only 2 million population city in Austin, Texas, to here, I've gotten to experience what the nightmare of DC was, and I'm thankful not to be there anymore. But then I lived in suburbs, very similar to Salem in makeup, of Austin, where the growth was on the uptick, and we had Costco's moving in. We had other large retail zones that were being developed, and we had a lot of folks that had been there for 30 years and really saw and took part in engaged the commission there in Austin in helping deliver the end product that didn't make everybody happy, but it ended up being the best decision for the citizens of the city.
Councilor Yankee?
No,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Kelly, go ahead.
That's okay, because there's not a lot to add to those two great answers. You know, I would, you know, definitely echo that, you know, your great opportunity with the long range and the comp planning that's coming up. You know, if you've got a good, solid plan that had the buy-in from the community to begin with, I mean, you're going to be a lot more successful with, you know, matching and meeting the needs of the current market as you go along. So, you know, 30 years down the line, it's hard to say, you know, who was around when it was developed the last time. So you know, maybe it's more frequent next time the update. But, you know, the citizen engagement is clearly important. And then, you know, I'd echo what Casey said on the last one, is make sure, you know, consulting the experts and you not only have the, you know, the community buy-in, but you've got the experts' opinion on where the data come from. Is it, you know, is it legitimate data? You know, again, trying to balance the impacts of all the information that you've got from a social, economic, and environmental perspective.
Thank you. Councilor Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. We're number 3, bachelor number 3 now. How would you say Salem's performed in regards to its land use, transportation, and open space planning?
Great. Being a parent of 2 young boys, both under the age of 5. Open space planning is something really important to me, and I think the city has done a very good job with that. I like to drive around and be able to see the open spaces that we have available. I live in South Salem off Battle Creek, and so there's a lot to drive around and a lot to do for someone who is very engaged with their kids, like me. And so I greatly appreciate that. I also recognize the interconnectedness between open space planning, transportation, and land use, and realize that you can't change one without making an impact to the other. And I recognize the role that the Planning Commission plays in doing that. And so with that said, I think there's 2 areas of improvement that I can see that the city can continue to make. And one is in corridor planning. I think that's being heavily looked at as it relates to growth, how we can work on transportation throughput while maintaining steady growth and respecting the land use of the citizens. And then 2, really leveraging our external research, such as external perspectives. And I think there's some really good ones currently on the Planning Commission as well as on the council makeup itself, how we can look to other cities to see what they're doing and leverage that so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. I think a really good example of that was back a number of years ago when the marijuana law changed. And one of the questions that came before the commission and before the council was, how do we address marijuana production? How is that going to be zoned? Are we going to be able to put that in industrial, commercial? What's the proximity to schools if we do that, and that sort of thing? And so I think that back then it was, Denver and other areas outside of Oregon were looked at as best practices and how to address that. And I think continuing to do that can only improve the decisions that are made for the citizens in the future.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kelly Thomas again, and just to answer the question, I think that the majority, from what I've seen, being here not very long, it's been positive. I scoured the internet to look for bad press and stuff on zoning decisions, and I honestly didn't find any. I mean, I did see like what came out of from the last meeting about that development that I just talked about. Of course, there's a lot of press on the third bridge. And what I have seen in my neighborhood down there at the Nen neighborhood, you got that State Street corridor, and so that's gone to mixed use. And having background in sustainability, architecture, and planning, and I've been a long-term advocate of mixed-use development and multimodal transportation. Last night I was researching, trying to see if I could find something that would show a transportation link to land use, and in fact came across something that someone had posted on Nextdoor, and it was a fantastic map of showing the high-density areas and then the major bus routes. But of course, it's not just bus routes; it's bike lanes and maybe connected park. I don't think we have a linear park here. So I mean, is there a way to connect some of the park and open space systems with a linear park? In Carson City, we had a linear park, so maybe that's something to look at. We really need to overlay, and what I was looking at was overlay to the high density districts to make sure that the bus routes with high traffic are connected to the high density. It was pretty close. There was some minor misses, but if you can overlay the multimodal transportation, especially to the low income, because high density doesn't always mean low income. So. You want to make sure you've got all of these things and try to connect them, the best you can.
First off, we chose to come here. We bought a house here for my wife and I, and this is our home. And we love it here, I will tell you that. My wife's from England, and she loves to walk in the rain and all the sort of green areas here. And we go out to Minto Park. We, walk around downtown. We're sort of city kind of dwelling people. And I think the city has done a phenomenal job, particularly with parks and within the city areas. But I do think there are some problems. And I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm saying, there are not simple answers to complex questions. You can want there to be, but they're not. When I look at areas like the downtown area, and I'm comparing this with downtown Napa and downtown Old Town Pasadena, where I used to also live and work for a think tank there. And the area between sort of State Street, Front Street, and Church Street, there's this odd mix that if this was the Pompidou Art Center and everything was hanging on the outside of the building, it's kind of what it reminds me a little bit of, that, you know, you can have a beautiful restaurant right next to sort of a tattoo parlor. And I think that in the long run, I don't know if historically the zoning's contributed to this odd mix, and I'm okay with mixed use, but I think that you want to encourage commerce, you want to encourage tourism, you want it to be a friendly place in the evenings and the afternoons and on weekends that people can come downtown in that area and enjoy themselves. And to use my wife's British term, a few of the places are a little dodgy. And so I would want to say, what can we do to have at least a coherent plan as the neighborhoods change over, as the businesses change over, that we can build sort of that downtown area that is welcoming. And again, I'm not picking on Salem. I remember when half the stores in Stamford, Connecticut, I lived in Stamford, were boarded up during the Depression. And it's a horrible thing, and you can't fight the economics. But I do think working on a plan that gets you there is important. That's sort of it in a nutshell. But we love this area.
Thanks, and it does rain here a lot, so your wife should be really
That's
happy.
fine.
Oh, she does.
Councilor Leung. And this, councilors, this may be our last set of questions. We're coming up against our time, but if you have a burning one, let me know. But Councilor Leung, you go ahead.
I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Kopcho. Is that how you pronounce
That's
your last
exactly right, yeah.
name? Oh, wonderful. So my question, again, to all of you is, what do you offer to the commission that makes you stand out?
So, great question. Thank you. I think that my unique background in where I've been, where I've traveled, where I've lived, what I've taken part in, especially with situations like the suburbs of Austin, I think mirror very similarly what I anticipate as being booming growth in the Salem region over the next 10 to 20 years. And my direct involvement in the transportation planning of that region and how the decisions that were being made before I left are going to impact the surrounding areas, I think will very uniquely transfer to the Planning Commission here, as well as my background in doing, I think, part of the major role of the Planning Commission, which is identifying criteria and addressing that as it relates to the issue at hand and providing a recommendation. That's what I've done on a day-to-day for the last 10 years, and I think that that skill set plays very well to the role.
By the way, I live in Ward 4. I think when I have the gray hair here, so and the arrows in my back, I think that I bring years of business experience. I have degrees in finance and an MBA. I also am a graduate of the Georgia Institute of Home Builders, just happens to be. Have run for-profit businesses, have been on the government side of businesses, business $20 million, so not insignificant. Bring budgeting skills. But I think the thing that I probably bring most is a passion for service, because I believe in giving back to the community, the ability to listen, and the ability to bring people together, to work together and collaborate and find the solution, the truth, and the middle ground. That's in a nutshell.
Kelly?
Yes, I think that my breadth of knowledge and a wide range of fields that very specific to the Planning Commission role, having graduated the School of Architecture, been a planner, been a developer, been a home builder, done retrofits for homes, interested in historic preservation. I've had my own little business. I've worked as a consultant. I've delivered numerous presentations to the Planning Commission and City Council myself on behalf of my clients, and even when I told them they should do an open house, and they didn't want to. I had to listen. I wasn't able to do it, but you know, I've been a board member. I was a board member of the USGBC for Nevada before I was appointed to executive director, and so you're looking at collaboration with 12 board members to come up with effective solutions that maybe not everyone can always agree on. So actually echo a lot of what Al said relative to desire to serve and being collaborative in that desire to serve and trying to bring people together, and you don't always come up with not everyone's always happy, but you try to find the best fit for the situation at hand.
Great, thank you very much. Councilors, with your permission then, is there any objection? We'll move ahead and vote if you'll take a look at your ballot.
You want to do it now or inside the meeting?
I don't care. When do you want to vote?
Special order
Dan,
of
when do you
business.
want to vote?
It's set up for the special orders of business, but if you're welcome to vote now if you want.
Let's get it over with.
Okay. I'm with you, Tom.
No objections.
We can go ahead and not make these men sit here for the whole evening.
Mr. Mayor, if we have to formalize it and
Yeah, we will.
we can do it there.
In between undergrad and grad school 20 years ago.
Well, council president is supposed to run around and collect.
I delegated it. That was probably the hardest thing. Unrelated to
Dan.
professional service.
Yeah, you did. Nice try.
Well, we've actually had to go through, not with districts. People out there. Oh, you turned it?
Well, I'm glad I get to. We'll find out now. I thought we were going to have to sit for 2 hours. Yeah. I don't anticipate staying for the rest of it. Right.
Not much on the agenda.
I don't think so.
Wednesday's the fireworks.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. That third bridge. I'm actually working on a report right now for the Columbia River crossing in Portland. Big headache that revitalizing that bridge there has been given the region for the last decade and a half. So the third bridge thing here pales in comparison. So at least we don't have that.
Are we waiting for the stage two?
Secretary.
Oh, sorry. Not very loud. There we go. Call this meeting of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem to order. If the clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner Kaiser?
Present.
Commissioner Anderson?
Likewise.
Commissioner Nanki?
Here.
Commissioner Leung? Here. Commissioner Ossick is absent. Chair Hoy?
Here.
Commissioner Cook? Here. Commissioner Lewis?
Here.
Thank you. If you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Do we, I don't know who to turn to for additions and deletions. Okay. So there are no additions or deletions to the agenda. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Okay, Mark Wigg. You have 3 minutes, Mark. I think you know the drill. Yellow light comes on at 2, red light comes on at 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. Mark Wigg, I live in the Scan neighborhood, and I'd like to just talk about the report that came out recently about Hillcrest. Kind of fits in here. Anyway, Hillcrest, what that staff report didn't talk about was the fact that there is a need for an urban park in that area. To the south of Reed Road, there's an urban park identified in the master plan that says we need an urban park. That's not the same as the community park on the north side of Reed Road. So you need another park. And an urban park has lots of amenities that neighborhood parks don't have. They can have indoor facilities, they can have gymnasiums, they can have tennis courts, they can have parking. This has all that stuff already there with parking. Anyway, so it'd be nice to pick that up as an urban park. The other thing that the city needs is that multi-use path along Reed Road. It goes through Hillcrest. It connects the neighborhood to the west, to the employment center, to the east, Fairview. Wouldn't it be nice, instead of having to send people down Reed Road, you can put them on a multi-use path to get there safely? Yay. Okay. The next one is there's a need for transitional housing. This isn't set up for permanent housing, it's set up for transitional housing. And a lot of it is already ADA accessible. They had young women there, girls were in there a couple of years ago, 150 girls. They house fed, kept them safe in that facility. And so it'd be nice that you take a look at using that as transitional housing. And the one that I see a real need for, there's only 2 places in Oregon that a woman with an addiction can enter a program with her children. There's one in Salem, which has 7 beds and a 50-person waiting list. And there's one in Baker City. And so we need that. Talk to Marion County, see if you can work something out with them. There's a couple other things that you should take a look at when looking at Hillcrest. One is the need for a sobering center. There's one, it's a turnkey. You could go in there today, open it up, and use it as a sobering center. Stormwater detention. There's a large area there for storm 4 acres that you could do stormwater detention, just like you do with Gilmore Field. And there's a need to preserve historic buildings. The whole area is a historic district, or could be. So, get Hillcrest. Start with stopping the sale. It's on the market today for sale. Stop that sale, tell them we're looking at it, and then pick it up. There's money there for it.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Wigg? All right. Need a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
So second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Counselor, would you go over what's on the consent calendar?
Certainly. It looks like we have the minutes from December 10th, 2018, the draft minutes, including an attachment with the minutes.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. We have no action items. Let's see, no public hearings, no special orders of business. Information report. Mr. Wilch.
Yes, thank you, sir. I want to bring the pit count to your attention, which is for homeless accounting. And that's coming up in about a week, the end of this week.
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday.
This Wednesday is the count.
And so if anybody so wants to, the merrier, the better. And with me is
Lynette Brown. I'm the Section 8 manager for Salem Housing Authority. Andy asked me to come today to give a little bit about, well, last week we were in the shutdown, the government shutdown, and how that may affect our landlords and tenants. So, of course, the government has reopened today, or this weekend. In the calendar year of 2018, Salem Housing Authority, our program ended the calendar year being overleased, meaning that we spent all the funds that were allocated to us through HUD, and we also expended all of our reserves. This means that we do not have any reserves to pay landlords in the event that there's a shutdown past what we've already been given by HUD. So prior to the government reopening, we had funds to pay landlords rent through February. Now that the government has reopened for this 3 weeks, we should get the funding to last through April. If there was another shutdown, at this time, we should be able to cover rents through April. If the shutdown lasted into May, there would be a delay in payments to landlords because we do not have reserves to pay the landlord those funds. So what this means to landlords and tenants, per the tenancy addendum, which is attached to all leases that are under contract with the Housing Choice Voucher Program, it states in Section 5D of that addendum that the tenant is not responsible for paying the portion of rent to the owner that is covered by the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority's failure to pay the HAP payment or pay the payment to the landlord, housing assistance payment, to the owner is not a violation of the lease. The owner may not terminate the tenancy of a tenant for non-payment of the housing assistance payment. They would have to terminate the tenancy for some other cause, but not because the Housing Authority didn't make their payment. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Kirk.
Thank you, Lynette, for coming down. So if I recall correctly from the last report, we were having a difficult time recruiting landlords. Is that correct for this program? We're always looking for more landlords.
We are, I mean, of course, we're always looking for landlords. It is a little bit different in the state of Oregon because they, you cannot discriminate against somebody just because they have a Section 8 voucher. So a landlord cannot just say no because somebody has a voucher. So theoretically, any landlord in the community or in the state of Oregon could have to rent to a Section 8 tenant if they met all of their criteria. To rent from them. So, but you're still always looking for landlord buy-in for your program, of course.
I think it's possible that you might be thinking about HRAP.
Yeah.
I bet that's it.
Oh.
Thank you.
Yes. And that we are always looking for landlords, yes.
Commissioner Kaiser.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So just to clarify, what you're saying is if you have a tenant that's receiving a Section 8 voucher, that if they pay the difference of that, that they can't be evicted for non-payment. Is that
Correct.
in a nutshell?
Correct. They
Okay.
cannot be evicted for the part of rent that we're
That we're supposed to
responsible
be
for.
paying through the
They
voucher.
would still be responsible to pay their portion of rent.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
whatever that difference happens to be. I think that's a really important thing to note because I think there were some people who were feeling a little nervous due to that shutdown. So thank you.
Yes, correct.
Commissioner Anderson.
I have a question for Director Wilch on the pit count. You've talked about numbers, comprehensive counts and everything else, but I didn't see the actual number of people who were counted.
Well, they haven't been counted.
Okay, but I mean, in past years, I think what you said was it was good one year, wasn't so good the other year. So last time it was counted that you have what you feel is a good count, how many people were there is my question.
You mean volunteers or people
No,
counted?
how many people who were counted in the pit count?
Homeless count?
Homeless, yeah.
I don't know that I have that.
Okay, I'd appreciate it if you could just let us know at some later point.
I did that.
Commissioner Lewis.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the lapse in money from HUD as the government shuts down, opens, shuts down, that's not money that we're losing, it's just being held back, that we'll eventually get all that's coming to us.
Correct.
Commissioner Leong.
A question about the late payments. Let's just say that the government does shut down and then the landlord will not be receiving payments from your department until it reopens. So let's just say it's a few months before that happens. Will there, in addition to back pay, will any of those landlords end up trying to charge you extra for the late fees? Or will that not be?
Yeah, late fees is not,
Okay.
I mean, landlords cannot charge late fees for housing assistance payments.
Okay.
I would certainly hope that it doesn't go months.
Yeah.
But yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our meeting, so we are adjourned.
Call this meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency of Salem for January 28th to order.
Board Member Kaiser. Present. Board Member Anderson.
Likewise.
Board Member Nanki. Here. Board Member Leung. Here. Board Member Ossick is absent. Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Cook. Here. Board Member Lewis.
Here.
And Chair Bennett.
Here. We don't have any additions or deletions. Do I have any public comment? No. No one has signed up to address the Urban Renewal Agency. Anyone? Okay. The consent calendar. Councilor Hoy.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
The consent calendar includes the minutes from the January 14th draft Urban Renewal Agency minutes, a resolution authorizing the short-term borrowing for the McGilchrist Renewal Area, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the Mill Creek Industrial Park Urban Renewal Area, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the North Gateway Urban Renewal Area, item 3.2D, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal Area, item 3.2E, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the South Waterfront Urban Renewal Area, item 3.2F, authorizing the short-term borrowing for the West Salem Urban Renewal Area, item 3.3A, which is the fiscal year 2017-2018 Urban Renewal Agency Financial Report. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sent an email earlier to the mayor and the city manager and the council president asking if we might have Mr. Lacy comment on why certain amounts are borrowed with different urban renewal agencies, and if it would be appropriate for Mr. Lacy to speak a minute or two about that.
We also have Renee Frazier here from the Urban Renewal.
Okay, Renee's here too, sure. I don't care who speaks as long as somebody does, yeah. So, go ahead.
To push the button. Good evening, I'm Renee Frazier from Urban Development. So every year when we decide how much financing that we need to do in each of the URAs, we look at how much tax increment we're expecting, and then how many projects or how much money we want to spend on projects in each of the URAs. So in some years, we're borrowing all of the tax increment that we're getting every year. In some of our smaller urban renewal areas, we borrow all the increments so we can get the most money for projects. And in some of the areas, we might not borrow for 2 or 3 years if we're not having a lot of large construction projects going on. So we look at both of those things when we decide.
Yeah, I noticed two figures seem to come up a lot. One is 900,000 and one is 3.5 million. Maybe you could describe how those figures are arrived at.
Sure. So in McGilchrist, for example, we didn't do a du jour last year. So we had some money sitting in the debt fund. And then we got about $800,000 in increment. And we looked at how much we might need for projects to maybe contribute to the right-of-way acquisition. We needed to match some grant dollars. So that's how we determined how much to borrow in that area. In West Salem, $3.5 million was a couple years worth of increment we borrowed at once to try to get some money in the construction fund for the Wallace Road 2nd Street project.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions on borrowing? Are we borrowing from ourselves?
No, we're doing a short-term borrowing from U.S. Bank.
Okay. What's the cost of the borrowing?
I would defer to Mr. Lacy
I
for
knew
that.
Lacy was here. I just wanted
See, I knew he was going to speak at some point. Oh, he's not?
David Lacy. Samantha Nalloway from Finance. The origination fee for US Bank is about $33,000, and then the interest is about $1,600, and then we'll get bond counsel's fees after the bonds close, but we estimate it's about $45,000.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. We have no public hearings, no special orders of business, and an information report. Okay, any questions? We are adjourned. Yeah, is there a motion? Yeah. Call this meeting of the Salem City Council for January 28th to order.
Counselor Kaser? Present. Counselor Anderson?
Ditto.
Counselor Nanki?
Here.
Counselor Leung?
Here.
Counselor Ossick is absent. Counselor Hoy?
Here.
Counselor Cook?
Here.
Counselor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. Counselor Hoy, any additions or deletions?
No.
Counselor Hoy, could you give me a motion to move up special order of business?
I move that we move special order of business to the head of the agenda.
Second by Nanki. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll start then with special orders of business. I want to announce the new planning commissioner will be Casey Kopcho, and ask you to join me in approving that decision.
So moved.
Okay.
There's no vote, it was just a vote by ballot.
Oh, okay. Well, Casey, you win. You don't have to go through it twice. Congratulations. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Okay, we'll go back to the regular order. Council manager comments.
I thought you asked for council comments as well as council manager?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
go first, though.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My wife, Jessica, and I attended last Monday the Martin Luther King celebrations. The mayor was there in the morning at the North Salem High School, where there was a great program put on by members of all the high schools in the Salem-Keizer School District, and then we followed that with a march to the Capitol, where there was another good program, and then we followed that by a march back to North High School, and then that was followed by a worship service at the seat of Faith Temple just off of North Market Street. And all of it was a wonderful celebration, both on behalf of the school district and the city and at the state capitol. And it clearly reflected the life and contributions of Martin Luther King Jr., as well as clearly pointing out to us there's much more we need to do to achieve full racial, social, and economic equality in this nation. So I was glad to be a part of that, representing the council.
Thank you, Council. That was really an excellent day, excellent program. Any other? Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I joined probably 60 volunteers on Saturday down at Minto Brown Island Park, planting trees with our partners, the Friends of Trees. Planted several hundred small trees along the path to try to reclaim that area and make it provide some shade and make it a much nicer area as it heads off of the Peter Courtney Bridge. So that was a great experience. It was very foggy and very cold, and we had, I think, probably 60 volunteers. It was really a great day. Thank you.
None of them will be in the view shed, will they? They won't wreck the view out there, will they? Good.
Low growers.
Low growers? Excellent, excellent. Anyone else? I attended a program at Center 50 Plus Saturday morning celebrating their 10th year as Center 50 Plus and their 43rd year as our Salem Senior Center. Had a turnout of 150 people to have breakfast and enjoy a program and discuss the tremendous work being done by the hundreds of volunteers involved in the senior center and the services and programs they provide. So if you're 50 plus, there's a place for you out on, yeah, who'd have thought, out on Fairgrounds Road, or Portland Road rather. So appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on then. Have a proclamation this evening. Willie Richardson. Gonna come on down again this time too, eh? Whereas in Oregon, the earliest documented African American is Marcus Lopez, a crew member on the ship Lady Washington in Tillamook on August 14, 1788. And whereas in February 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson introduced Negro History Week, and in 1976, Black History Month was formally adopted to honor and affirm the importance of Black history throughout America. And whereas each February, communities across Oregon join to celebrate Black History Month and provide Oregonians with an opportunity to pay tribute to the African American community and the richness of Black culture that has helped shape our state and city. Whereas Black History Month is a time for all residents of the city of Salem to remember those Black pioneers who advanced civil rights, fortified communities and families, educated their children, and contributed to the communities in which they lived. And whereas we pay tribute to African American history and we recognize the Oregon Northwest Black pioneers for their focused and effort to make known the Oregon African American story, now therefore I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2019 as Black History Month in the City of Salem, Oregon, and encourage all residents to join in learning about and celebrating the contributions African Americans have made to our country, our state, and our community, dated this 28th day of January 2019. And I'd like to introduce Willie Richardson, President of the Black Pioneers.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett, and good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Don't you feel better? It is an honor for me to be here to accept this in recognition of the contributions that African Americans have made to this great state that we call Oregon, and home to many. As we as an organization work to ferret out that history, our goal is to always tell that story so others can be aware. And we have enjoyed the honor of being the group to find those stories. It just confirms for us that there are so many who have paved the path for some like me to be here and to be part of a larger community that value that history. Again, thank you, and it will be shown in our office.
Thanks. Okay. This is time for public comment. As was mentioned earlier, You have 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, the light turns orange, and then at 3 minutes, it goes red. And if you'd please stop your comments at that point, appreciate it. Clay Peterson.
Hello, council members and mayor. I've been here before to ask, on behalf of the Marion Pope Peer Coalition, to have a reimbursement for an event that we hold every year at the Marion Square Park, is Hands Across the Bridge. And now I'm here in order to talk a little bit about what is happening there now. First, I just want to say that the last year I've been really excited about a lot of the stuff the City Council has done. I just want to give you guys kudos about what's gone on with the with Costco, what's gone on with the plastic bag ban, and even like putting off the third bridge as a topic to be dealt with later, I think has been a wise decision as well. So I've been really happy with a lot of the decisions that have been made. But when the recent decision about the homeless sweep followed by the refusal to continue permitting lunches under that bridge, it made me really sad because that's part of the community that we've reached out to a lot when we do our recovery event there. And it's also been part of the community that I feel like I've become close with through my work in the 9 years I've been here. I think that I've seen our city get way more prosperous over the last 9 years. I remember when I first moved here, seeing a third of the buildings downtown for lease. And I think that it's sad that as there's been more traffic and more people using our downtown the way that it's intended, that I feel like that's also put more strain on the homeless population that lives down there. And I think that the sweep, actually, I've heard went really smoothly. I think it was one of the best administered sweeps that I've heard about. We were talking to someone earlier today, some of the people that came here with me, and they were saying that the sweep went smoother than any other sweep that they've seen. But the big, I think that sweeps are, necessary to some extent. But the big thing that that this sweep in particular bothered me is that it came right before the point-in-time count, and having the sweep right before the point-in-time count is going to make our count for homeless people in this region significantly lower than it would have been if we had been able to just wait 2-3 weeks to have that sweep after the count, because it's hard to find everybody because everybody kind of scatters and goes and lives other places after you do that. The other last point that I want to make is that it's really great that Arches has stepped up in order to make sure that that the meals can continue, but at the same time, that's not a covered area. When it was under the bridge, people didn't have to stand in the rain, didn't have to stand in the cold when receiving that meal. And I think that we, as government, a lot of times say that we really want community partnerships and people to step up and be able to take care of a lot of problems. And this was an example of a lot of groups in our community doing that. And I feel like we've kind of let them down by refusing to permit it. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Manager, was the point-in count taken into consideration in this event?
Yes, it was. Thank you for the opportunity to share some additional information regarding the removal of the camps under the bridge. Police Chief Moore and Public Works Director Fernandez, their departments, their teams did coordinate with Community Action Agency on issues such as the point-in-time count, coordinated with social service agencies to ensure that people who chose to have access to services were given that opportunity. And I believe 9 of the people under the bridge did access services. So we did our best to, and I appreciate the comment regarding a well executed or a well carried out removal, and that was certainly our goal, to do so in a humane way that provided as much access to services for those individuals who need help as was possible. And we did coordinate with specifically the Arches Program, Community Action Agency on the point-in-time count. the timing was necessary because of the conditions under the bridge.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to bring this up at 6F, but it seemed, we got a report, but it seems like this might be an appropriate time too. I am interested in the issue of no cover over the, at arches, and I'm wondering if the city might have someplace, some surplus canopies or tents or something that we have used for other things that are stored someplace that we might be able to consider if we could potentially set something up in the Arches parking lot. That's just that's a suggestion, and maybe if the city management could think about that, we might be able to resolve that issue as well.
Great. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, while we're on it, City Manager, I keep hearing different numbers of those that were displaced from the bridge. I hear 15, I hear 30. Was there a final number?
I would have to ask, in both Director Fernandez and Chief Moore are shaking their heads. That would be information we can attempt to determine and share that later, although the chief is on the move. No?
Looks like you're leaving.
Jerry Morris, Chief of Police. I have smarter people than myself here, thank goodness. There was probably about 70 campers originally that were under there, but as the Lieutenant Van Meter pointed out, we went to the camp along with social services a week before that we actually removed the campsite, and by the time we got there were only 15 people there, we believe.
Any other questions for the chief? I'm sure we're going to talk about this later. We'll, don't go anywhere. Laurel, oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I had a question about the task force that's being formed, but should that wait until later on?
Would you mind?
Yeah,
Well,
I could do that.
thank you. We'll bring it up at that time. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on then. Laurel Hines.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and I have a general comment, and I appreciated the comments about the Martin Luther King issue. I'm a big supporter of diversity and honoring diversity, and I think if we're going to honor diversity, we need to keep in mind that not only is Salem and the country becoming more diverse about races and cultures and all kinds of things, that one of the things you may not be aware of is that a recent book came out that says that 31% of people in Oregon are now considered nuns, which nuns are non-religious affiliated people. And what I was a little bit upset about is I didn't attend, but I did listen to the State of the City address. And I, as a non-religious, non-believer, science advocating person, I was distressed to hear that it was begun with a minister directing everybody to pray after the invocation. And I wanted to suggest that next year that the invocation, if there is one, I think it's great to have inspiration at the start of such meetings, but I do think it should be secular, or at the very least honor various religions at the start, because we all need inspiration, but it doesn't have to be religious. And those of us who don't believe in prayer are very offended by prayer. And the United States Constitution calls for the secularity of government and a separation of church and state. And a religious invocation at a city function is basically probably a violation of the separation of church and state. So I really hope that in the future, any such things that you have for the city council be secular in nature, or honor various kinds of religion and also have a secular one. And as long as I have a second, I want to add that I appreciate all that the city council and the mayor does without pay. And I really think you all deserve to be paid for sitting through these meetings and doing all the work you do for free. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All righty. Consent calendar, Councilor Hoy.
I move approval of the consent calendar with the following poll, 3.3A by Councilor Cook.
Second.
And the consent calendar includes 3.2A, which is a transfer of appropriation to facilitate replacement of the 911 telephone system. It adopts Resolution 2019-13, transferring $1,016,470 of appropriation from general fund non-departmental contingency to general fund non-departmental capital outlay for the purpose of facilitating replacement of the 911 telephone system. It includes item 3.3B regarding water treatment plant staffing, which approves the addition of 2 water treatment plant operator positions to the utility fund, increasing authorized staffing from 319.3 FTE to 321.3 effective immediately. Item 3.3C authorizes the purchase and sale agreement of the acquisition of real property with Janet B. Swartout and the Dan B. Swartout Revocable Trust and residential lease with Zach Swartout for property located at 681 Reese Hill Road Southeast. It authorizes the city manager to execute the attached purchase and sale agreement and residential lease for real property. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Any questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay, special orders of business. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to pull.
Would you move?
I move staff
Thank you.
recommendation.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Now go ahead.
Thank
Sorry.
you. I just wanted to bring this up to highlight some of the recent training that staff had a chance to attend, if someone could speak to that. The FEMA training? Who was sent from staff for that?
Our emergency manager can provide that information. We had a dozen city employees attend. Greg might know their names.
Good evening. Greg Walsh, the City of Salem Emergency Manager. The recent training that we sent 12 of our representatives to from the city was the managing public information in emergencies. So we sent 12 representatives from our Joint Information Center team that we've established, and that was one of our lessons learned from the water advisory was we needed a more robust team that could communicate more effectively and make sure that we get the word out. So we went to the Center for Domestic Preparedness in Anniston, Alabama, and we took that 4-day course. It is part of our ongoing plan to improve that. We also, along with that, have developed a communications plan. Now, internally to the city, we've also had several other ICS trainings and exercises. In the last 2 weeks, I ran training for all of our EOC members and exercises for the teams.
So it sounds like this is something communication skills you can use even when it's not an emergency. These
Certainly.
are just great best practice. And this training was paid for by FEMA, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. At a lot of the courses between FEMA's, there's a large acronym for all of their, it's a consortium of all of the training facilities that FEMA has, and all of the training that we go to, they pay for our airfare, they pay for everything else. Quite literally, they feed us, they house us, they do airfare, they transport us, and they reimburse us for our parking.
Thank you. And then I did see that there were some grants available, most recently from DHS for emergency services and planning. Is anyone attempting or planning on applying for any
Yes,
of
ma'am.
those?
We have the State Homeland Security Program grant, which we are using for a number of potential upgrades to the new police facility, including adding a bulletproof glass lining. That is one of the applications. There's several others. There's also the SPIRE grant. I forget what the acronym means. It's something that they were very proud of. But one of the things that we're looking at doing, that we're actually, the application deadline is the beginning of March. So we are coming together to look at the applications that we got from our other facilities throughout the city. I know there were a few recommended things that people were looking at, including a high-wheeled rescue vehicle for mass casualty incidents, a mobile EOC for the fire command, fire hazmat command, similar to what the police have. But these are all just recommendations at this point. We have to sit down as a team and really evaluate all of these and what goes forward with to the state for that, and that also goes with what we use regionally. So as a regional partner with the City of Salem, we work really well with other partners, emergency management agencies throughout the state and through the capital region. So working together with everybody, because if it's an asset everybody can use, it's a lot easier to justify.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this important work, and I look forward to hearing more updates.
Certainly.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. This is not necessarily a question, Mr. Walsh, just a comment. I'm particularly happy to see that the city agreed that it will comply with U.S. Executive Order 13224 that prohibits transactions with terrorists, because I'm sure that's been a real problem for our city.
Yes, sir.
Well, they aren't paying the council yet, but we'll see.
Oh, my God.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to information reports. So who wants to start in? Councilor Anderson.
I'm on a roll. I might as well keep going.
Just keep going.
I'm interested about the street tree removal. I guess two things, and I don't know whether it's Mr. Fernandez or Mr. Dameron who can answer this. First question is, how many actual parking spaces will be added as a result if the trees on Division are removed? I saw that there were numbers 32, 31, but I think those included trees that were further west on Division that were taken into that account. So that's my first question. How many actual additional spaces will happen on that area of Division Street where the trees are proposed to be removed? And the second one is more of a procedural question, and that is, I understand it's going to SPRAB at some point. I think it might be Valentine's Day. And if that's the case, is there anything that happens after SPRAB? In other words, can the SPRAB decision somehow come before the council?
Councilor Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. I'm trying to, there's an attachment to the staff report.
Oh, I looked at it, Mr. Fernandez, and I couldn't figure it out either.
Well, I just have to count them here real quick, if you give me just a second.
Well, perhaps while Director Fernandez is counting, City Attorney Atchison can answer your second question regarding process.
So, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So the code doesn't provide for a council call-up of these types of decisions, so the SPRAB decision would be final.
All right, are we ready for, there are 21 existing parking spaces. They will turn into 32 parking spaces.
So we're talking about 12 parking spaces and
11.
Excuse me. I was given, yeah.
11 additions.
And then at some point, and maybe this information could be presented to SPRAB, I wonder how many parking spaces are in downtown, and then what percentage is 11 of the total number of parking spaces that are either in downtown as a whole or in that area of the north side of downtown? I don't need the answer now.
Wow.
By the way, Councilor, the SPRAB hearing is in March, not in February.
Oh, okay.
Okay, any other? Yes, Councilor.
So just a question, thank you, Mr. Mayor, about the process. It is within the purview of Public Works to make a call on a tree. When you make that call, can you just walk me through, Director Fernandez, the communications process? Just to how, I understand that this is going to the SPRAB board this month, but whenever those situations come up, how does this work in the process? Can you take me through?
Sure. So typically when, not this situation.
Not this situation.
Typically, if a public tree has to be removed, it is posted. The tree itself is posted. I think it's posted for 14 days before removal, and information is provided to the public on where to call and that kind of thing. Tree removals occur because the tree's diseased, damaged, because it's in the way of another infrastructure improvement. Sidewalks is one where either roots have to be removed or the tree has to be removed, but it can be any number of other things. So that's, but typically it's posted on the tree itself.
So outside of posting, there's no other process where you would say, I'll take this to a board, or I'll take this to a neighborhood association, or I'll take it anywhere else, take it to council, or take it, no?
No, when a tree is, no, in fact, the code, the council 3 years ago passed a code amendment that specified how this was going to be done, and there's administrative rule associated with that. And so if it is a tree that is to be removed, not because it's in the way of a infrastructure improvement, then there is a process, and there's very defined steps related to if the tree is diseased or that kind of thing. In the case here, on Division Street, and this is Division Street between Liberty and High, there's two options. One is that because it's parking being installed, it theoretically is in the way of a proposed infrastructure improvement, so I could have made that decision. Because that parking is not required, that parking is really about planning. There's another provision in the code that says SPRAB can consider, I can refer it to SPRAB, and in this case I've decided to refer it to SPRAB so that they can weigh the policy decision of adding more parking for future needs versus maintaining the trees, and that's what SPRAB will be deciding.
And when you're making these infrastructure improvements, where does the tree canopy plan fall into play on this? Is that something that's consulted or kept in mind with the trees and infrastructure improvements?
Well, no. I mean, if we're widening a street, if we're putting in a pipe, if we're putting in repairing a sidewalk and the tree is lifting the sidewalk, the decisions are made a factual basis by factual basis. With respect to the tree canopy, Councilor, there is money now allocated in perpetuity. I mean, we'll bring it back every year to plant trees. So we're investing, $200,000 a year to plant trees throughout the community every year, and that's Councilor Hoy participates in virtually every single one of the Friends of Trees events that we pay for, and then there's what I've coined industrial planting. So we have a contract with a firm called Ecology, and we're just planting trees everywhere.
So it's not that you're not listening to the tree canopy process, it's that the infrastructure improvement takes precedence. And since there are money for replacement trees, you're still in keeping with the canopy assessment.
Also, I think it's important to make a distinction. Director Fernandez's answer was in relation to a specific project. For the decision that is before the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, they could very well consider the tree canopy, because it's a broader policy question really of trees or planning for additional parking, and not a specific sewer pipe or a specific sidewalk replacement project that's being brought to SPRAB. It's a larger question that could very well, if SPRAB chose to consider the tree canopy plan, could certainly do so.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the SPRAB's decision final, or does that come back to you for review?
It's final.
Thank you.
And again, that's per code. That's per Salem revised code.
Thank you.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. So my question is about the police facility site, because I know the parking there on Division Street is going to change from parallel to angled. I was just looking at the preliminary offsite. Well, it's actually the preliminary offsite planting plan, but I'm looking at the spaces there, And it looks like right now in Division, on the north side of Division, there's 7 parking spaces parallel. And in the preliminary plan, it looks like there's 18 parking spaces. So for an 11 space net gain.
Right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And wondering then, we're looking at adding additional parking spaces, removing the trees, and then adding additional angled parking spaces east of Liberty Street. And that's not including the south side of Vision Street. So I'm just wondering, it sounds like we're kind of wanting to do this because stuff's already happening in the area, so we want to take advantage of that. But the funding is not being taken from the police facility site to remove these trees and add parking, I believe. Yes, okay, yeah. So we're not using our police facility money to do that. It's just kind of like an opportunity, so we're gonna just do that. But wondering if we need to do that since we're gaining more spaces already to the west of Liberty, quite a few. And then wondering overall, what's our parking plan? Do we have a parking plan for downtown? Can we see it where we plan to convert existing parallel to angled or vice versa, or eliminate, or,
Right, so this is a proposal that's, I'm sorry that Director Rutherford isn't here, because this is an idea that came from urban development and really thinking about the future and the future needs of the area. The police facility, so the Division Street west of Liberty, between Liberty and Commercial, the police facility requires that on-street parking, and that's why that one's part of the project. Between Liberty and High, it's really a thought that, one, there's more development coming into the area. I understand the MAPS property is going to get an additional development. There are development proposals around the mall, and then there's some on-street parking that's being removed for the improvements related to the police facility, because remember, there's a whole lot of work that's being done where Liberty Street's going to become two-way, and that kind of thing. So there's some parking removal, and my understanding is that the Urban Development Department staff, in seeing that and seeing an opportunity, because we're under construction in the area, it's an opportunity to add parking and address existing and additional existing and future needs. So that's what it's about. So, and that's why the decision was made that because this is a planning effort, that this really needs to be, the decision of removing the trees really needed to be in front of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and not an administrative decision.
If I could follow up really quick. So just to be really clear, though, this planning is not connected to the police facility. The funding for it, the plan for it,
is not.
All of that. It's just saying we're doing
adjunct.
We're doing
It's
work
adjunct
in
to
the
it.
area, so we might as well do this
Right.
also. So
Correct.
I mean, theoretically, though, this could be visited at a later time.
Right. The decision to work it today is, we're already designing one block. It's not a whole lot of money to design the other block. We already have contractors on one block. The additive costs of, the incremental cost of doing another block is, efficient to do it now. But it is a planning and policy decision, not a requirement of the police
If I
facility.
can ask one more question, and I know this is not in your bailiwick, but is there a plan for parking in this area or downtown? And I don't know who to direct that question at, but.
I do not.
Yeah.
I do not believe that there is an overall master plan for how many spaces are coming out or how many spaces are to be added in this part of this is a part of downtown that is emerging, and I do not believe, I am not aware that there is a master parking plan for this area. This is I believe there's an opportunity.
Clint Dameron, Urban Development Department. I believe Mr. Fernandez is correct, but I will verify that and provide that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we'll move on then. Any other questions in the information sections? Councilor Leung, did you?
Yes, I have questions on 6F, the food distribution in parks.
Yes.
Wrote down my questions on my
Sure.
phone. Excuse me a second. So I was just curious, let me pull up the report real quick. I was looking at who was on the task force, and I was wondering, if there was a reason why there's no, like, option for, like, a city council member to sit on it. And the second question is, why is there only one advocate for the homeless on the task force, at least projected to be on the task force?
Certainly, and Director Fernandez can provide some additional information. This task force is intended to be operational in nature, looking at the operational impacts of activities on the city parks. If there were any policy considerations that would emerge from this work, those would certainly be brought to council, and council could choose, perhaps with a recommendation from staff, to have some additional community review of those policy considerations. But this initial task force, the initial task is really focused on the operational impacts and not policy considerations. The policy that has been temporarily suspended is an administrative policy. Regarding advocates, the makeup of the task force, Director Fernandez can speak to that.
Yeah, so it was simply a thought about keeping it to a manageable number so that so we can have good discussion and get good information. So it was really just a view toward who is providing the service and then who has to address the impacts, and bringing those people together strictly to talk about food distributions and sundry distributions in parks. So that's all this is about. My guess is other issues will come up, and that's why we're proposing more of a facilitated meeting, so that as other issues come up, they can be listed, captured, but we really want to focus on the specific issue, and that's why the types of people, the representatives are. You notice there's no names, so it's really just the people, the types of organizations, stakeholders for the issue.
I guess my main concern, especially since there's only one homeless advocate in comparison to 13 other individuals, will their voice actually be heard, or will they be drowned out by the voices of the other people who are part of the task force?
Well, knowing one person who's already submitted her name, I don't think she'll be drowned out. And certainly in selecting the individuals, we will take that into consideration to make sure that the advocate is truly an advocate for that segment of our population.
These meetings will be posted, open to the public. There will certainly be opportunities to present information to. I wanted to make it clear that this is not going to be this task force is not intended to take public testimony or to hold a public hearing per se, but by practice, all of our task forces accept either written or oral testimony as part of their work. So that if there are other advocates or homeless people that want to provide information, I would imagine that the task force would want to hear from them.
I'd like to just follow up on the councilor's question. I notice you've got 2 social service agency representatives. I think it would really help to know that those social service agencies that are selected to put representatives on are homeless advocate organizations. I think that would help to understand if it's going to be Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, Arches, or any one of the other, Salvation Army or UGM. I think it would help to know that there are other folks on there that advocate actively, specifically, professionally, however you want to look at it, for the homeless. I assume that's what the...
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
I assume
my
that's where
thinking
you're
was
headed.
who are agencies that feed.
Yeah.
So so what's the as I was thinking a little bit about putting this together, who else is providing food and
Yeah.
where and how, to understand how this how the whole issue of providing food to the homeless is working, so that we can develop a good process and policy for. And really the issue is, the reason this has been assigned to Public Works is because we operate the parks.
Right.
So this is really about feeding and distributions in parks. There are, I well understand that there are many issues related to homelessness in the city, and this task force is not intended to address anything other than food distribution in parks and the impacts associated.
And you have 4 distributors and permittees. Are those folks who provide food?
Right, those are the people that have actually been pulling permits and doing the service at the parks.
So there's 4 of those. One, and I'm not sure what homeless advocate means precisely, but one person specifically identified as a homeless advocate. And I feel like you're kind of assuring me that 2 more will be from social service agencies associated with this issue or with the population that's being
absolutely
served. So
Absolutely.
we're looking, I hope, at about 7 or 8 people who, with really live, direct knowledge of the experience of people on the street, as well as the specific needs and how they're being filled.
There's clearly some staff people on the task force because they're the ones that have to address the issue. But I did the math, and I want to make sure that there were more more people that were not staff than people that are staff on the task force.
Well, I hope you appreciate there's real interest in us following who, if not by name, by organization, so we can get a sense, just for our own, I think, our own edification, that this is being handled sensitively to the population that's being affected by this policy.
And we will certainly report back when, and provide progress reports.
Of course.
Thanks. What's the timeline of the task force? When are you hoping to first meet?
Well, as soon as possible, as soon as we can get people convened. We put on the staff report that we expect to have something completed within 60 days. The reality of getting people organized and going, this might take 2-3 weeks to get people identified, get people impaneled. Then, we hope to get the work done in 2 to 4 meetings, probably meet, once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. If people can do that, so we can get in, get the information, develop a solution and get out and be ready to implement.
Thanks. And then, Mr. Manager, will the moratorium continue then also that has been imposed on distribution of food in parks until the task force completes?
At this time, yes, and that will be also evaluated as the work begins. But for now, yes, it will continue.
Okay.
Mr. City Manager, could I have a time frame on that report back to council on this issue?
Well, the end date is within 60 days, and certainly reports will be provided as certain milestones are reached, such as the task force being named, results of the first meeting or meetings. So I don't have a specific schedule because it really depends upon if there's anything to report. And Director Fernandez has outlined a fairly ambitious schedule, and I'm confident we'll be able to meet that. We'll provide reports accordingly.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Moving on to 6E, the Historic Landmark Commission designation and approval of a rather substantial mixed-use development. It's going to go in at the old McMahon furniture spot that has been pretty much an eyesore since the place burned down many, many years ago, and I just think this is a wonderful development. Again, it'll be bringing more people downtown. I know it at least, well, I don't see any subsidy or grant that they're asking for us. They may come back at some point, but I think this is a great project, and I look forward to its completion and adding to that good mix we have downtown. It'll be both retail on the first floor, on the ground floor, and various sizes of apartments above.
Yep. Very good. Okay. Nothing further then. We have no ordinances, no first readings, no second readings. Did anyone else want to speak to the council? Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager Powers, District Attorney, and the council people, specifically Councilman Anderson. My name is Kristen Zilke, and I would like to address 2 things that came up tonight. One of them is regarding Arches and where the food and the resources was brought there. It was talked about a tent or a cover there. I've talked to Dan Sheets, who was the gentleman that first started the underneath the bridge resources that they had there 15 years ago, that's currently still involved in it, that is working with Arches, and I've talked to many of the Arches representatives. They're under the understanding that if they were to make something permanent for a cover there, they might have to do something like a city permit or something like that. They're not for sure exactly what the rules and regulations will be on that. So they would like to have feedback from the city as far as what the steps could be, and see if, say, a church or one of the groups that might be doing a feeding might be able to bring something on the night that they're doing, or the city might be able to provide something. So I at least wanted to say that to you to help clarify that part. Second thing, as far as the pick count that is going to be done Wednesday night, I will be a part of that actual count. Several of the people that's here tonight will also be a part of that. I just came from a meeting where we was addressing that right before I came here, and we are under confusion about where the people that was brought out, and it was done great that night that we cleared out the bridge, but where they exactly went and how that's going to be brought in for the count. So we're still on for sure how that's going to be. A lot of the people that was removed came to the warming shelter, which is at First Presbyterian Church, when it's 32 degrees, and I've worked with City Manager Powers here on several occasions as a volunteer with him. So he at least knows what I'm talking about on that. Those people removed came there that night. Some of them still don't have a fixed location of where they're at, and we don't know where that is. So there's still some confusion on that. One other thing, I represent Project ABLE in a few other places, Behavior Care Network, as well as this Homeless Count Coalition and other places. On 1599 State Street, which is between 17th Street and the Center Street Market, is Project ABLE. And the sidewalk there is really mounted up by the trees and stuff that's going there. There's cracks, mounds there. You can't have a wheelchair go there. People with canes or crutches or whatever have problems walking in that area. And that's a disability place. And it's very hard for people to gain access to that area. And I at least wanted to bring it to the city council to see if that might be able to be addressed sometime soon. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Councilor Nanki. Just second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and I know that, because I was involved in the count last year, and typically weeks in advance as well, they're communicating with the homeless population to let them know where the hubs are going to be.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that when we posted and actually went under the bridge, that we actually had someone transfer that information, albeit it moves through the population as well. So hopefully they will come out for services that day.
Yes, we have representative from Arches that was there to provide that, but not all of it was able to get through because of a lot of chaotic situation that was going on there. And some people that didn't exactly want to cooperate with what we was trying to do there at that time because they was kind of upset of being forced out. So it did cause an issue on that. But we did have representatives trying their best to show them where those hubs are going to be at, yes.
Wonderful, thanks.
Anything else? Okay, that's all I have. So we're adjourned.